So here is the final section for chapter 28. So we're going to start this part with fruits. Okay, so fruits are, it's a structure that's derived from the ovary and it encloses one or more seeds. So the tissues um, from the ovary are the nutritious part of the fruit, and it's the part that's brightly colored. So the evolution of fruit is what made efficient seed dispersal possible in plants. Just like the evolution of flowers made efficient pollination possible. So it makes it more efficient to disperse the seeds because the fruits have the seeds within them, and then if animals eat the nutritious part of the fruit, then they'll disperse the seeds when they exit through their feces. Okay, so here's just some pictures of an example of the seeds that are inside this ovary wall. So this would be the fruit part of this fruit, the nutritious part of the fruit. And then so we have animals that eat fruit, and then when they digest the fruit, obviously they benefit from eating the nutritious part of the fruit. And then once they're done, they through the feces, they'll drop the seeds in different locations. So that's what allows for the dispersal for a lot of these plants. So here we can see a phylogenetic tree that summarizes a lot of the adaptations that allow for plants to reproduce efficiently on land. Okay, so things like having a single Gametotangia egg retention on the parent. Okay, so that's one. There's the thick walled spores. Okay, there's the alteration of generations, the sporophyte dominated life cycle. So these are all examples of adaptations that allow for plants to diversify on land. Okay. Oh, I think I'm sorry. I should lower this a little bit lower. Okay, so yeah, so here you can also see the fruits and flowers. Okay, so these are also innovations that allowed for plants to reproduce on land. So, so when we talk about the diversification of land plants, we're really talking about the diversification of angiosperms. Okay, so an adaptive radiation occurs when a single lineage produces large numbers of descendant species that are adapted for a variety of habitats. So the diversification of angiosperms is associated with three key adaptations. We have the water conducting vessels, okay, the flowers, and the fruits. So these adaptations allow angiosperms to transfer or transport water, pollen, and seeds efficiently. So when you look at the morphological traits, angiosperms have traditionally been divided into two major groups, the monocotyledons or monocots and the dicotyledons or the dicots. So these groups are based on the differences of the cotyledons or the first leaves. So these are just the first initial leaves that grow out of the seed when the plant sprouts. So the cotyledons, these are the ones that store nutrients and the plant provide nutrients for the plant embryo. When it's a monocotyledon, they only have one leaf. Okay? And when it's a dicot, they have two cotyledons or two leaves. Monocots are considered to be a monophyletic group. Okay, so they have what this an ancestral species or an ancestral group, and all the descendants are included within that group. So they're monophyletic. Dicots are considered to be paraphyletic. So biologists have adjusted the names assigned to the angiosperm lineages to reflect new knowledge in phylogeny. Okay? So now the dicots are separated into different groups. Okay, so now you have things like the eudicots, so eu meaning true, dicots, right? And those are considered monophyletic. So here is what it used to be like. Before, everything that's in red was considered to be a dicot. So we only have one group that was the monocots, and then everything used to be considered dicot. Okay? So before, that's why before it used to be a paraphyletic group. But with new discoveries, new research, they then reassigned these, and then so only these down here are considered to be eudicots. Okay, and then there's other groups like the magnoliids. Okay, and then there's another there's an older group which are considered to be the oldest living angiosperm lineages up here, like water lilies and things like that. Okay. So before the dicots were considered paraphyletic, right? Because they have an ancestor, a common ancestor, but they didn't include all of the descendants. And just give me 1 second while I plug this power cord. Okay. Now that these were reassigned, you have things like the eudicots. So these are considered monophyletic because they have an ancestral um, group and all of a common ancestor and all of the descendants. Okay. So here are the monocots and the eudicots. You can see the cotyledons here developing inside in this mustard embryo. Okay, the monocots only have one cotyledon. The eudicots have two cotyledons. You can also look at the differences in the veins. So in monocots, the veins are parallel in the leaf on the leaves, and in eudicots, they're branched. The veins are branched on the leaves. So I did go over this in lab. So if you remember, it's the magnoliids, those are the ones that have a net. The veins are arranged in a net um, pattern. And then the other thing you can look at are the number of petals. Monocots have petals in multiples of 3, and eudicots have petals in multiples of 4 or 5. The green algae are also considered to be a paraphyletic group. And so green algae, these are important primary producers. They they occupy all types of freshwater habitats, so whether it's streams, ponds, uh, lakes, but they can also be found in unusual environments like snowfields and ice flows. So green algae live in close association with various other organisms. So the unicellular green algae are common endosymbiotes in planktonic protists that live in lakes and ponds. And then you also have things like lichens, which are an association between green algae and cyanobacteria, or sorry, green algae or cyanobacteria and fungi. So when you have those associations, the organisms are called lichens. And these are usually found in environments that lack soil. So approximately 85% of the 17,000 species of lichens involve green algae. So here's an example of the green algae that you can see in these unusual environments. Okay, so like snow flows, like I mentioned before, ice fields, or snow fields, sorry, and ice flows. Okay. For non-vascular plants, these were the first lineages to branch off of the phylogeny of land plants. And in these, the gametophyte is the dominant phase in the life cycle. So these types of plants don't have true roots, so they're not taking in, you know, a lot of the nutrients or water from their roots. Instead of having true roots, they have what are called rhizoids. So this is what they use to anchor themselves to soil, or tree barks or whatever they're hanging on to. Non-vascular plants, they lack just like the name implies, they lack the vascular tissue that's enforced with linin on the cell walls. Okay. And they have flagellated sperm that allow the sperm to reach, the eggs. So that's one of the reasons why they require moist environments or wet environments. And in these, the spores are dispersed by the wind. For seedless vascular plants, okay, like the ferns, horsetails, club mosses, these are a paraphyletic group. And here the vascular tissue is made of linin reinforced cells. Here, the sporophyte is the dominant phase in the life cycle. But when we see the life cycle, we can still see that the gametophyte is we can see that the gametophyte is physically independent of the sporophyte. So if you remember the fern life cycle, the sporophyte grows out of the gametophyte, but eventually it overtakes it. So they're independent of each other. In the moss, where the gametophyte is a dominant phase, the sporophyte grows on top of the gametophyte and it relies on the gametophyte. Okay? So they're not independent of each other. So in seedless vascular plants, the eggs are retained on the gametophyte, and then the sperm swims to the egg with flagella. So seedless vascular plants also require water to reproduce. Okay. When we look at seed plants, these are a monophyletic group, and they include gymnosperms and angiosperms. And the two uh, synapomorphies that define this group as a monophyletic group are seeds and pollen grains. Okay? Because angiosperms produce seeds in the ovaries, and you have gymnosperms that do not. Okay, so that's going to be it. So the test that's coming up will include this section as well. Okay, so it will be chapters 1, 25, 26, 27, and 28. Okay, so 5 chapters. Okay, so we'll pause here and then we'll continue next week.